Good morning to all of you, and a special welcome to all of our visitors who are in town, no doubt for the marathon, and I imagine you're here already because you finished first. For those of you who didn't go to bed late or didn't get up early this morning, you may have heard that there was some breaking news here in Chicago overnight. The Cubs won their second game in the playoffs and now lead 2-0. But all kidding aside, I am so very heartened and grateful and humbled by the Holy Father's appointment of me to the College of Cardinals this morning, and I really have to say that it's another reason for me to be a proud member of this community and a leader as the Archbishop. It really is something, as he says, something about this wonderful archdiocese that we have been selected. But on to more important things, the gospel today. We, in these weeks, as we move towards the end of the Church's calendar, are hearing a lot from the Gospel of Luke about how we develop, cultivate, and sustain our faith. Faith is something that can be very elusive because sometimes we find ourselves struggling with the ability to believe, and we know there are doubts that flit in and out of our minds about life, about ourselves, about God. And so in these weeks, we are given a lesson of how we come to faith, but also sustain it. And what we hear is that an important element to sustaining our faith is not our will, not the mental gymnastics we go through in arguing with ourselves about what we believe or don't believe, but it is prompted, spurred, triggered, and sustained by thanksgiving, by our ability to give thanks. And what is it that we are asked in the gospel today to give thanks for? Well, that comes so very clearly in the two stories that we have about lepers being cured. Lepers tell us what we should be thankful for. For here you have these men coming to Jesus. They are totally ostracized. Their lives are literally being eaten away. They have no place in society. They are poor, rejected. And yet Jesus reaches out to them and lets them know of their dignity. It is a reminder that each one of our lives, no matter our status or where we are, enjoy the gift of life. All these men had going for them was that they were still breathing. They were alive. They had the breath of God in them. And so today, as we hear this gospel, we should not think that it was nice that Jesus healed these poor people who were suffering this great illness, but rather that he challenges us to sit here today and just think about the gift of our ability to be alive, our ability to breathe, to have life itself. And the more in life that we are able to do that, the greater our ability is to respect the lives of others. Sometimes we forget that. Fulton Sheen, the great preacher of the last century, told the story of one day he was going to a leper colony himself, and he had these little crosses he wanted to give each of the lepers, and they were there holding their hands, some of them with no fingers. Their hand was gone, there was just a stub. And he came across such a man, and he took the cross and he just dropped it into this poor beggar's hands, and he walked on, and he was ashamed of himself immediately, because he couldn't touch this man. And so he went back and grabbed his hand with both of his and looked him in the eye. He knew that he had to go back and do that, not just to heal this man, to let him know of his dignity, but to save his own dignity. The more in life that we give thanks for our very life, we are more disposed to give thanks to God and support those whose lives are so much at risk. The poor and the indigent, those who are on death row, the child in the womb, the elderly who are told that their lives don't matter. And it is when we forget about the dignity of our own lives and when we lack the ability to give thanks for our very life that we begin to forget the value of others. And so today, especially in these months, this month of pro-life, let us be pro-life first of all by giving thanks for our very life, and let that prompt our response to defend the lives of others. But there's something else in this gospel that we should attend to about our thanksgiving, about our faith that we give. And it is that evil will not conquer. These men who came to Jesus saw their lives eaten away day by day. They had no hope. Evil was going to win, and they were going to die. So often in our lives, we find evil to be so overwhelming, to the point where we lack faith that good will win out. Some years ago, when I was a pastor, I went around to the classrooms and came across a 4th grade class. They were studying about Adam and Eve's sin in the Garden of Eden. And so I went through the story with them. And I said, you know, notice that Adam is asked by God, why did you do it? And he blames Eve. And then he asks Eve, why did she do it? And Eve says, well, the snake made me do it. Nobody wanted to take blame. Nobody wanted to be accountable, I said. And then I moved on to another story, and at that moment, one of the little 4th graders raised his hand and said, wait a minute, Father, what about the snake? Now, you have to be careful about 4th graders. They're very dangerous. They have just a little bit of reasoning power and can put 2 and 2 together. And I said, what do you mean, and what about the snake? Well, how come God didn't ask the snake why he did it? And then it occurred to me that God should interrogate the snake. But it came to me. It's because evil is so mysterious. It slinks into our lives like a serpent in ways that are inexplicable. And that creates sometimes a fear and panic in us that it will win the day. But Jesus stops that leprosy in its tracks. He announces to us that good will win out. And that each of our lives, well, it may be plagued by evil, and we may have habits that seem to terrorize our lives, or we see evil in the world, that we should believe that good will conquer. Even though life seems to be filled with the mystery of great evil, it is even more so filled with God coming into our lives. I experienced that recently as I celebrated with couples who were marking their 50th anniversary. One couple couldn't make it and they asked me to visit them. The husband was ill in the hospital. And so as I did, I said, why don't we do what we did at the Mass for the other 50th anniversary celebrants and have you renew your vows? And as I did, and they said those words, I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. They were making an act of faith, even though the husband was so gravely ill and seemingly did not have a whole lot of time. They were making an act of faith that their word to each other had lasting value, that good will overcome death, that their love would be everlasting. Time and again, I have seen that as a priest and the people of God, that their belief that good overcomes evil in so many different ways. Today at the Eucharist, which we call Thanksgiving, the word Eucharist means thanksgiving, you will come before the Lord to receive the body and blood of Christ. And as you do so, give some thought about your own life. Give thanks that you are able today to just be here, not because of any accomplishment or social status or approval from others, but simply because you have the gift of life in you. And as you receive that gift of eternal life in the Eucharist, be willing to speak out and support those whose lives are so easily at risk in society. And two, the one who calls you forward is the risen Lord, who conquers death. Have faith that good overcomes evil, because you remember that the one who is on this crucifix is the living Lord present in our midst. He has overcome the greatest evil of death. Today, the gospel challenges us to really believe that God gives us dignity by working in the very limited circumstances and relationships of our lives. And secondly, to believe and look for how good conquers evil, and be willing to join in that great work of the Lord in giving hope to people, those who have lost hope because evil is so present in their lives. That is what we are called to believe today, and it begins by giving thanks.